I still remember the exact moment it all started to fall apart. I had spent months, no, years, pouring every ounce of energy, every late night, every single dollar I could scrape together into something I believed would change everything. I thought I was ready. I thought I had the plan. I thought I would finally make her proud. But when I finally showed her my failure, the look on her face burned deeper than any setback ever could. My wife laughed. Not a gentle chuckle, not a teasing smirk, but a laugh that cut through me like ice. It wasn't cruel, I don't think. It was just disbelief, a reaction that said, "You thought you could do this?" And in that instant, something inside me cracked. Her sister, on the other hand, she saw something different. I can still hear her words, soft but firm, like she believed in a side of me even I hadn't dared to believe in myself. "You're not finished yet," she said. "You just haven't tried the right way." And it struck me then, the difference between someone who laughs at your failures and someone who quietly carries a faith in you that no one else does. I wasn't just failing at a project or a dream. I was failing in front of the people I cared about most. The laughter, the smirk, the disbelief, it stayed with me for days, nagging at the corners of my mind. Every time I thought of giving up, her sister's voice nudged me back, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I still had a chance to turn this around. And yet, even with her belief, I felt trapped. The world seemed stacked against me. Friends who once encouraged me now offered polite sympathy, and my own confidence felt like a candle flickering against a storm. I was caught in that frustrating, terrifying in-between. I could quit, or I could fight, knowing that every step forward might just end in another public failure. I didn't know it then, but that laugh, the quiet faith, and the unbearable weight of my own ambition were about to set off a chain of events I could never have imagined. It wasn't just about proving myself. It was about survival, love, and the kind of choices that haunt you when the stakes are higher than you can see. That night, as I sat alone staring at the pieces of what I thought was my dream, I made a decision. I would try again. Not for her, not even fully for me, but because I had no other option. Something inside me had shifted. But what I didn't know was that this choice would bring me face to face with challenges I couldn't yet comprehend and revelations about the people closest to me that would change everything. And then it happened, something so unexpected that it made me question whether all my effort was about to be wasted before it even began. Before all of this, the laughter, the doubt, the quiet encouragement, I thought I had my life figured out. I was ambitious, sure, but practical. I worked a steady job, had a modest apartment, and believed that success was a series of careful steps, not leaps into the unknown. I loved my wife, still do, but over time, her patience for my dreams had thinned. I could see it in the way she rolled her eyes when I mentioned new ideas, the sighs that followed my explanations, and, ultimately, that laugh when I stumbled. Her sister, on the other hand, had always been different. She was sharp, kind in a way that felt effortless, and surprisingly perceptive about people. She never laughed at mistakes, never dismissed ideas outright, even when they sounded impossible. Somehow, she saw potential in me when I was too blind to see it myself. When everyone else doubted, she asked questions instead of judgment. She became my silent anchor, my unexpected cheerleader, and sometimes, the only person who reminded me why I started in the first place. Our relationships were complicated. My wife and I had history, shared memories, routines that made life comfortable, almost predictable. But that comfort had a price. It bred skepticism, a cautiousness that clashed with my restless ambition. Her sister, meanwhile, was a wild card, someone I trusted more than I should, someone who saw through the cracks I tried to hide. She wasn't part of my life in the same way my wife was, but somehow, in the midst of failure, she became more real to me than anyone else. The project itself, what had caused the laughter, wasn't a simple gamble. I had poured everything I had into it. Long nights, borrowed money, hours that left me exhausted and shaking. I believed it could change my life, give me the independence I craved, the recognition I deserved. And yet, standing there in my living room, listening to her laughter, I felt smaller than I ever had. The room seemed to shrink around me, filled with disappointment I couldn't escape. It wasn't just about money or success. It was about validation, about proving that I wasn't foolish, that my dreams weren't naive, that I could fight for something meaningful even when the world, or the people I loved doubted me. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. If I wanted to survive this, I couldn't rely on the approval of anyone else. Not my wife, not my friends, maybe not even myself. I had to find a way to keep going when everything seemed stacked against me. And that's when her sister stepped closer, not with answers, not with a plan, but with a look that made me understand I wasn't alone. She believed I could still win, even when it felt impossible. But her belief came with its own challenge. It meant I had to face the one thing I had been avoiding all along. Something I wasn't ready to confront yet, but that, if ignored, could destroy everything before it even had a chance to start. I thought failure was supposed to be private, a quiet disappointment I could nurse alone until I figured things out. But failure has a way of spreading, of settling into the spaces between people you love, twisting even the simplest conversations into reminders of your shortcomings. My wife's laughter wasn't the first crack in our life, but it was the loudest, the one I couldn't ignore. Her sister, though, she refused to let me crumble entirely. Every time I considered quitting, she showed up unexpectedly, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a message that said more than words could. She didn't pressure me. She simply reminded me that I had it in me to keep going. And every time I saw her, I felt a mix of gratitude and guilt, because part of me knew I was leaning on her too much, depending on her belief in ways that weren't entirely fair. The main conflict wasn't just about my project. It was about people I loved and the lines I was crossing without realizing it. My wife had started avoiding conversations about my work, not because she didn't care, but because every discussion ended with tension, frustration, and that laugh that echoed in my head long after the words had passed. Meanwhile, her sister's quiet faith became both a lifeline and a mirror, reflecting my own insecurities back at me in stark, uncomfortable detail. I felt trapped between two forces I couldn't reconcile. My wife's doubt, sharp and unyielding, and her sister's encouragement, gentle but insistent. Every choice I made seemed to tip the balance in one direction or another, and I began to notice a strange shift in the way people around me treated me. Friends who had once offered support became distant, colleagues more skeptical, and even strangers seemed to sense the fragility in my confidence. And then the moment came that made me realize this conflict wasn't just internal. A meeting, a chance to pitch my project to someone who could actually change everything, went horribly wrong. My nerves betrayed me, my preparation faltered, and the rejection hit harder than anything I had imagined. I walked out feeling smaller than ever, the weight of my wife's laughter and her sister's belief pressing on me from opposite sides. But the worst part wasn't the failure itself. It was the realization that something about this situation was bigger than me, bigger than my mistakes, and that the next move I made could either make me or break me entirely. And in that moment, I noticed something that didn't make sense, something that made my heart skip a beat, and it wasn't part of the plan. After that meeting, everything felt like walking on a tightrope over a dark abyss. Every phone call, every email, every glance from anyone, even my wife, seemed loaded with judgment. I couldn't tell who believed in me and who was quietly waiting for me to collapse. Her sister's voice echoed in my mind like a lifeline. "You're not done yet. Don't give up." But the closer I got to trying again, the heavier the weight on my chest became. I started obsessing over every detail, rewriting plans, redoing presentations, thinking I could somehow force success to arrive. Nights stretched into mornings, my apartment cluttered with notes, sketches, and empty coffee cups. I barely ate. I barely slept. I barely spoke to anyone except her sister, who seemed to sense when I was about to spiral and appeared at my door with nothing but a quiet presence that reminded me I wasn't alone. But the tension between us, the unspoken understanding, the shared moments of hope and fear, made everything even more complicated. I caught glimpses of emotions I didn't want to name. There were smiles that lingered too long, small touches that could be interpreted in countless ways, and conversations that felt more like therapy than encouragement. And all the while, my wife's laughter haunted me, a shadow over every attempt to move forward. Then came the opportunity that could change everything, or destroy me completely. I landed a chance to pitch my revised project to someone powerful, someone who could finally validate all the effort, all the sacrifice. I prepared meticulously, rehearsed until my voice shook, and convinced myself I was ready. But when I walked into the room, I felt a strange, almost electric tension in the air. Something wasn't right. People were polite, but their eyes carried a weight I couldn't place. Something about the room felt calculated, as if my failure, my struggle, was part of someone else's plan. I pushed through the presentation, speaking faster than I wanted, answering questions I barely understood. I felt sweat prickling at my temples, my hands trembling under the weight of everyone's scrutiny. And then, just as I thought I might survive, a comment, a small, almost casual remark, hit me like a hammer. It suggested someone knew more than they should, that someone had been watching me closely, predicting my every misstep. I left the room shaken, my mind spinning. Her sister was waiting outside, eyes wide with worry, her hand on my shoulder grounding me. But even in her presence, I felt a cold certainty. This was no longer just about success or failure. Something larger was unfolding, something that involved more than my ambitions, more than the laughter or belief of the people closest to me. And then, as I tried to process it all, I stumbled across a message, unexpected, cryptic, and impossible to ignore. The kind of message that changes everything you think you know and makes you question who you can trust. I stared at the screen, heart racing, realizing that the next move I made could either save me or destroy me completely. I thought I had a handle on the situation. I thought her sister's support, my own stubborn drive, and the lessons from past failures were enough to navigate whatever came next. But I was wrong. That message, it wasn't just a warning. It was a revelation. Someone close to me had been manipulating parts of my project from the shadows, deliberately setting me up to fail. And when I traced it back, the truth hit harder than any failure ever could. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I trusted implicitly, someone whose opinion I had valued above my own judgment. And the worst part? Their motive wasn't money. It wasn't even envy. It was something far more personal, far more insidious. A quiet, simmering grudge that had been hiding behind smiles and casual conversation all along. I felt my stomach drop, my hands shake, and a strange, cold clarity settle over me. Everything I had believed about loyalty, support, and trust was about to be shattered. I had one choice left, to confront it, to fight back, or to walk away knowing that the world I thought I knew had just turned upside down. But as I stepped forward to face it, I realized something terrifying. The game had only just begun. I didn't know how long I stood frozen, staring at the truth I had uncovered. The betrayal stung like a physical blow. My heart pounded, and 1,000 thoughts collided at once. Anger, disbelief, hurt. But somewhere beneath all of that, a small voice, the same one that had guided me through every failure, told me I couldn't back down now. I confronted the person, heart racing, voice trembling but firm. Every word, every accusation, felt like walking on thin ice. They smiled, calm, unervingly calm, as if they had expected me to arrive at this moment. And in a single, deliberate confession, they laid everything bare. The sabotage, the manipulation, the subtle ways they had turned others against me. I should have crumbled. I should have let it destroy me. But her sister was there, quietly, steadying me with her presence, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. And something inside me snapped. Instead of despair, I felt a fierce clarity. I could no longer let this person dictate my life, my dreams, or my worth. I fought back, not with anger, but with determination. I corrected the course of my project, outmaneuvered the schemes that had been laid against me, and proved my capability in ways that left no doubt. By the time the dust settled, I was standing taller than I had ever imagined, not just because of success, but because I had survived the storm, exposed the truth, and reclaimed my life. Her sister's smile met mine, full of relief and something more, pride, maybe even admiration. And in that moment, I realized how much I had grown, how much belief, persistence, and unexpected alliances could change everything. But just as I thought it was over, my phone buzzed. A new message, one that made my blood run cold, because it wasn't from the person I had just confronted. It was from someone else, someone I hadn't even considered could be involved, and it hinted that the game, the real game, was far from finished. After the storm, there was a quiet that felt almost surreal. The chaos, the betrayals, the tension, all of it had passed, leaving behind a strange, fragile peace. I sat in my apartment, looking at the pieces of my life that had felt shattered for so long, and realized something important. Nothing was ever truly lost if you refused to let it define you. Her sister had been my anchor through all of it. She had believed in me when everyone else doubted, stood by me when my confidence faltered, and reminded me that failure wasn't the end. It was a chance to grow. I understood now that her support wasn't just about the project or about proving myself. It was about showing me that trust, patience, and quiet encouragement could shape a person in ways laughter never could. My wife's laughter, painful as it had been, had also taught me something crucial. It forced me to confront my weaknesses, to examine my limits, and to push past them. She had doubted me, yes, but she had also been honest about her feelings, and that honesty, though harsh, became a mirror. I saw the side of myself I needed to improve, the resilience I had underestimated, and the fire I needed to keep alive. By the time I finalized the project, the feeling was unlike anything I had known. Victory wasn't just in the outcome, it was in the journey. Every setback, every ridicule, every moment of uncertainty had prepared me for this. I wasn't just celebrating success, I was celebrating endurance, growth, and the people who had shaped my path along the way. We celebrated quietly. Her sister and I shared a moment, a glance that said more than words ever could. Gratitude, connection, and unspoken acknowledgement of everything we had been through together. My wife, she remained at a distance, conflicted but observing. Perhaps she didn't fully understand, perhaps she never would. But that no longer mattered. I had learned that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. And yet, even in closure, life had a way of reminding me that the story never truly ends. That last message, the one that hinted at more challenges ahead, still sat on my phone, a quiet pulse of uncertainty. I didn't panic. I smiled, because I knew something I hadn't before. I was ready. I had learned to trust my instincts, embrace the people who believed in me, and face whatever came next. Life, I realized, was a series of tests, not all of them fair, and not all of them obvious. But the ones that mattered most were the ones that taught you who you were, who you could become, and what you were willing to fight for. And in that lesson, I found a kind of victory that went far beyond any project, any judgment, or any laugh I had endured. I had failed. I had doubted. I had fought. And now, I was standing, not just as a survivor, but as someone who had truly won. But even as I closed one chapter, I couldn't help but wonder what was waiting for me in the next one.